and now joining us is Dr. Blair Braden, who is an assistant professor of the Barrett Honors Faculty at the Department of Speech and Hearing Science at Arizona State University. Thanks for joining us, Dr. Braden.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Yes. And you are doing a study. You're leading a study, a 4-year study on aging and autism in adults. Is that correct?
That's correct. So we've been doing this work for a few years already, and we recently got funding from the National Institutes of Health to continue for 4 more years at least. But I hope to follow these adults for a very, very long time.
Very little is known about how aging will affect adults with ASD. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so Leo Kanner gave, the kind of first diagnosis of autism in the 30s. And that's really not that long ago in the grand scheme of things in understanding health conditions. And it didn't even make it to the DSM until 1980. So we just don't have a good picture of what autism looks like in older adults and how aging may affect them differently. There's so many people out there who are probably on the spectrum but just haven't been identified.
Fascinating. This whole thing is fascinating to me. And in your studies, you have identified that men in general, middle-aged men, that their brains and the way they use their brain is a little bit different. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, so it's middle-aged men with autism compared to middle-aged neurotypical men. So one of the things that we really are concerned about is executive functioning. So we know that executive functioning can oftentimes be a difficulty for people on the spectrum, and we also know that executive functioning gets harder for everybody as we age. So we're worried that people on the spectrum may really see those difficulties to a greater magnitude. And that's what we found in our study when we looked at middle-aged men with autism compared to matched neurotypical men, so men with the same IQ, the same level of education, that our middle-aged men with autism struggled on executive functioning. And then when we looked at the brain, we saw a brain network that they weren't using when they were doing executive functioning. So we think that might be the root of the problem.
And do we have any idea why that exists?
Well, we also saw some structural differences in the brain, so some brain regions that were a little bit smaller and not as well connected to the rest of the brain. So we think it could be a brain communication breakdown, or that it's not happening as efficiently.
Okay. And do you hope that by figuring this out that we can, what's the hope? This information is very exciting, but are you thinking there'll be something behaviorally that'll be a workaround, or what are you hoping will come of this?
Yeah, that's exactly it. So what we've done is we've identified some of the weaknesses, and now we are tailoring behavioral interventions to try to address that. And you nailed it about alternative strategies. What are some compensations we can do to help executive functioning? So for example, we see that long-term memory, it functions pretty well in our middle-aged adults with autism, very similarly to their neurotypical counterparts. So we're going to try to train up some habit strategies that can compensate for difficulties in flexibility and planning and those executive functions that are harder.
I just can't imagine. We get to meet a fair amount of individuals who are on the autism spectrum, but in terms of looking for middle-aged and older people on the spectrum, how tough has it been for you to be able to find these subjects?
It's been very tough. So we have a little over 30 in our study right now, and I've been out in the community trying to find these individuals for close to 4 years now. And we partner with the Southwest Autism Research and Resource Center here in Phoenix, which is an amazing community center. So we've been able to find a lot of people through them, but a lot of people I've found by just going to support groups and other community events. And now our new venture is to try to recruit middle-aged women with autism. And that, as you can imagine, is also very difficult because of the big sex difference in not as many women receive a diagnosis.
Absolutely.
And many of the participants in your study are being diagnosed for the first time?
Mm-hmm, it's true.
Okay. And so when you say middle-aged, though, what years does that mean to you? What are you looking for?
Yeah, that's a great question. We adjust the middle age window a bit when we're talking about adults on the spectrum because so little is known. So in neurotypical aging, we usually don't think of middle age until 50 or so. But for us, there was really this gap in what happens to anybody over the age of 40. So we start our middle age recruitment at 40 years of age, and then we accept people as old as we can find them. So we have a few in their 70s.
This is very exciting to me because I just turned 56 and I thought that made me senior citizen. But apparently I'm middle-aged.
Yeah, you're middle-aged.
I'm still cooking with gas. This is very exciting to me. Okay.
Also, something that struck you is the high rates of depression and anxiety. Can you talk about that?
Yes, so that was something we weren't looking for, we weren't expecting, but we collected data on because how people are feeling with mood and anxiety can affect how they perform on cognitive tasks. And what we found was that people endorsed really high rates of depression and anxiety. So that's the thing we moved on first. We just this summer finished a behavioral intervention to try to reduce stress and depression and anxiety in our adults with autism. And those results are hot off the press, and we found a really strong reduction in depression symptoms. So that's very exciting for us.
Amazing. So now, if people want more information and or they know somebody that would be ideal for this study, or they themselves are ideal for this study, where do we need to send them so that you can put them into your group?
Absolutely. So I shared my website with your producers yesterday. Yep, there it is. That would be fantastic if anyone themselves wants to volunteer for our study or knows someone who may be a good candidate. There's a place to go on there to click a button about participating.
Okay.
You can also see our publications.
For those of you that are listening to the podcast on iTunes, it's asu.edu/Braden, BRADEN. ABA Lab, LAB as in boy. Really amazing. When people are a part of your study, what kinds of things can they expect to have to do? Is it mostly surveys, or are there MRIs?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we do it all. We try to make it, pack in as much information as we can get without taking too much time from the person. But we get questionnaires, we do cognitive assessments, so pen and paper kind of tests and some kind of building tests. And then we do an MRI, so about an hour in the scanner, which sounds like a lot, but a lot of our scans are functional MRI. So you're actually looking at a computer screen, doing different thinking tasks and giving your answers on buttons. So it's kind of interactive and sort of video game-like. So people generally really enjoy participating in the study. We can give them direct feedback about their brain, that everything looks normal, which is mostly the case, but it's kind of nice to have that confirmation. And then we can also give them feedback about how they're doing cognitively, what areas they may be struggling more or less with. And then they are compensated $100 for their time because it takes about 4 or 5 hours out of people's time. So we're really flexible too. We will do evenings and weekends, anything we can do to get these individuals.
Okay, but if somebody doesn't live in the Phoenix area but is willing to travel, what would they have to come once or twice, do you think?
So our participants come every 2 years. So as long as they would be willing to come every 2 years, we'd happily take out-of-state participants.
All right.
And what are you hoping is the ultimate outcome of the study and how it can be practically applied?
What we hope is to pretty definitively describe what things are going to get easier for adults on the spectrum as they get older and what things are going to get more challenging, and then to be able to develop meaningful interventions for those challenges. And we do the brain imaging for a couple of reasons. One, because there are advances in neuromodulation where we may actually be able to target brain circuits that aren't performing the way we would like, and that could improve people's independence. And then also it may be a way for us to see if our behavioral interventions are helping by an objective measure. If people start using the brain circuits they weren't using before, that's pretty powerful evidence that our interventions are working.
Right.
And lastly, we think it's really important for clinicians more broadly to understand what autism looks like in older adults. We really worry that gerontologists who are very unfamiliar with the condition may actually misdiagnose some older adults as possibly having a dementia that they don't have.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Right. Okay.
There's a lot there. This is very exciting, and I hope that you'll come back and join us as you get results and things and have stuff to report on.
Yes, I would love to.
Okay, fabulous.
Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Exciting.
Yeah, I can imagine that there's a dearth of information when it comes to older people on the spectrum. I mean, when we think about how it's just been in the last 10 years that this, awareness has come about.
Yeah, it's a very interesting thing. But in my head, as she was talking, I was going through, okay, who do I know that's over the age of 40 that is on the spectrum? I actually came up with a huge list of people. So I'm going to send an email out and try to connect them, because what a wonderful thing. And great for them to find out where they are and to get all of that. But how great for all of our kids coming up. It had never occurred to me that once we helped Jem with his executive function skills, that they would get worse later on.
Right.
And that we need, as parents, to plan for that and to be on top of that. That had not occurred to me before.